Position has been made redundant, effective immediately. Tyler Beaumont said it at 7:53 on a Monday morning over Microsoft Teams. His camera was off. Just a grey circle with his initials where his face should have been. I'm Joel Winslow, 54 years old, and the CEO's 31-year-old son just fired me without even looking me in the eye. There was supposed to be a folder on the boardroom table, manila, sealed shut with a red tab. I'd walked in at 7:50 expecting our weekly infrastructure review. Same room on the 14th floor overlooking Bay Street. Same time, same stale Tim Hortons coffee someone always left on the counter. But nobody else showed up. Just me and my laptop and the hum of the HVAC system. Then the team's notification. Meeting request from Tyler Beaumont. I should have known right there. He had an MBA from Ivy and roughly zero understanding of what we actually built. 4 months at the company, promoted to Chief Strategy Officer because he was Frank Beaumont's son, the golden child, here to lead our digital transformation. Last month, he asked in an engineering meeting if we could make a Argus run on blockchain to attract crypto investors. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. When I explained that critical infrastructure monitoring for Canadian utilities doesn't need blockchain, it needs reliability and compliance with CSA standards, he made a note on his iPad. I saw the screen. Joe, resistant to modernization. 2 weeks before that, he pitched Argus to a group of Series C investors as the Netflix of industrial security. Miles Fenton, one of the engineers I'd mentored for 6 years, had to excuse himself to the washroom because he was laughing too hard. Now here he was on Teams, camera off, with another grey circle labelled HR, Toronto. We're restructuring some of our legacy technical roles, Tyler continued. His voice was smooth, practiced. Like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror that morning, maybe over his morning protein shake. And unfortunately, your position is being eliminated. You'll find your separation details in the folder on the boardroom table, Legacy Technical Roles. I built Argus, the entire monitoring platform this company ran on. Designed the architecture, wrote the core detection algorithms, debugged it at 2 in the morning when our Series A funding nearly collapsed because the prototype crashed during a live demo for Hydro One. 26 years, first engineer hired after the seed round. I'd trained more than half the people who now outranked me on the org chart, and I was legacy. This isn't a reflection of your contributions, the HR voice added. Female, scripted, clearly reading from a template. We value everything you've brought to Genford Systems over the years and wish you the best going forward. I looked at that folder sitting on the polished table. Didn't touch it. Where's Frank? I asked. Pause. Half a second too long. He's in board meetings this morning, Tyler said. But he wanted me to personally oversee this transition. Right, the CEO couldn't be bothered to fire his longest-serving engineer himself, sent his son to do it over Teams with the camera off on a Monday morning while half the office was still in the elevator. There was supposed to be a third participant on the call, General Counsel. I'd been told he'd be present for any personnel changes at my level. His circle stayed grey the entire time. Probably knew exactly what this was and wanted distance. Is there anything else we need to discuss? HR asked. I thought about saying something about how Tyler had announced the Sentinel rebrand at Collision Conference in Toronto last month without telling engineering. New name, new logo, new website, press release to every tech outlet in the country. He'd renamed my entire system, and I found out from a LinkedIn post while eating dinner about how he had absolutely no idea what Argus actually did or why it mattered to every utility company between Halifax and Vancouver. But I didn't say any of that. No, I said. We're done here. I closed the laptop, picked up the folder. My hands were steadier than I expected. Walking out, I passed Miles Fenton's desk. He was 32, systems engineer, one of the best I'd ever worked with. I'd mentored him since he was a fresh grad from Waterloo, taught him everything about Argus architecture, the real stuff that wasn't in any documentation. He looked up, saw my face, saw the folder. Joel, he said quietly. They're restructuring legacy roles, I told him. He just stared. He knew exactly what that meant. The parking garage underneath the tower smelled like concrete and exhaust, and that particular cold dampness you get in underground Toronto in November. Level P3, same spot I parked in for 26 years when I could get it. My car was a 2019 Honda Accord, nothing fancy. Paid off 3 years ago, smelled like coffee and that pine air freshener my daughter had hung on the mirror last time she borrowed it. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes. Didn't open the folder. Didn't need to. I knew what severance packages looked like. Standard formula. 2 weeks per year of service. Maybe a bit more if they were feeling generous. Non-compete clause they'd try to enforce for a year. Standard release of claims. But here's what they didn't know, and I mean they truly, genuinely did not know. 12 years ago, I was sitting in my father's study in his house in Kingston. He'd just died. Stroke at 71. No warning. Shoveling the driveway on a Saturday morning in January, and then just gone. My mother found him by the mailbox. He was a patent lawyer, worked intellectual property law in Ontario for 43 years, mostly for engineering firms and tech companies. Sharp until the very end, used to read patent filings the way other retired men read the newspaper. He could spot a weak IP claim from 3 paragraphs in I was 42 then, and Argus was just reaching functional stability. I'd been working on it nights and weekends before Genford even knew what it could become. Version 0.8, the core architecture that everything else got built on top of, that was mine. Built on my own laptop, on my own time, in my basement apartment in Leslieville before I ever signed a full-time employment contract with Genford. My father knew that. He understood how these things worked better than anyone. 4 days before he died, he left me a voicemail. I'd saved it, still had it. Sometimes I played it on the worst days, the ones where the office felt like it was shrinking around me. Joel. His voice was tired. He'd been reviewing documents late, working on something for a friend's company, even in retirement because he couldn't help himself. Whatever you're building for that startup, don't hand them the keys until they've earned your trust. I watched a client lose a patent he spent 4 years developing because he assumed his employer owned it and never checked. Took him 2 years in court and $200,000 to get it back. Set up a numbered company. File the provisional yourself through CIPO. You can license it to them later, but keep the ownership yours. Corporate loyalty in this country runs one direction until it doesn't. Trust your old man on this one. I must have listened to that voicemail 30 times the week after he died. Sitting in his study surrounded by his law books, the ones with the cracked spines that he'd highlighted in 3 different colors, and that oak filing cabinet he'd had since before I was born. Then I did exactly what he said. Winslow Engineering Solutions, Inc., registered in Ontario. Argus Core System, version 0.8, full architecture and intrusion detection protocols. Solo owner and architect, Joel Winslow. Filed with CIP, the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, with a priority date 6 weeks before Genford made me their full-time offer. Before any employment IP agreements, before any of the contracts they thought gave them ownership, I'd licensed Argus to Genford under specific terms. Their legal team skimmed it, saw my signature, filed it under employee inventions, and never examined the dates. They assumed the employment agreement covered everything. Standard assumption. Nobody checked that version 0.8 was filed before I was technically their employee. But I'd buried something in that licensing agreement. 2 clauses. My father helped me draft them over the phone. One of the last things we worked on together. Clause 9.4 stated that no licensing rights, no derivative works, no sub-licensing or transfers could occur without written approval from the original architect. That was me. Clause 6.1 stated that no system renaming, rebranding, or public repositioning of the core platform could happen without original architect consent. Tyler had just announced Sentinel at Collision Conference. New name, new branding, national press release, the whole production. He'd breached Clause 6.1 without even knowing it existed, and now they'd fired me. I started the car, drove home through traffic on the Gardner, made coffee. And I waited, because incompetence always reveals itself. You just have to be patient enough to let it. The email came 4 days later. Thursday morning, 9:47 a.m. I was on my couch in sweatpants drinking coffee and trying to figure out what early retirement at 54 actually looked like. Whether I'd start fishing. Whether I'd finally fix the deck railing my ex-wife had asked about for years before the divorce. Subject line: confidential inquiry. Partnership opportunity. Sender: Ian Crawford, CTO, Ridgeline Defense Technologies. I stared at that name for a full minute before clicking. Ridgeline was Genford's oldest competitor. We'd gone head-to-head on federal contracts for over a decade. D&D infrastructure, RCMP monitoring systems, contracts with provincial utilities across Western Canada. In public, both companies pretended the other didn't exist. In private, every engineering decision at Genford included a slide about what Ridgeline might do next. And now their CTO was in my inbox. Mr. Winslow, our IP intelligence team has identified that you, not Genford Systems, hold the foundational rights to the Argus core architecture through Winslow Engineering Solutions, Inc. If this is accurate, we'd like to discuss an exclusive partnership. We believe the original architecture determined where his work goes next. This can be handled with complete discretion. Ian Crawford, direct. Professional, no games. I read it twice. Then I walked to the window. My condo overlooked a stretch of lakeshore and a sliver of the lake between two towers. Nothing remarkable. Paid for by 26 years of salary and stock options that vested slowly. The belief that showing up and building something real would count for something. Real would count for something. Turns out loyalty is just another word for convenient when you're dealing with people like Tyler Beaumont. But this email was different. They'd done their homework. They knew something Genford's legal team apparently never bothered to verify. How did you find this? I typed back. His response came in under an hour. We monitor all Argus-related IP filings as part of competitive intelligence, standard practice for federal defense contracts. When we found that Winslow Engineering Solutions held the core filing through CIPO, not Genford Corporate, we did the math. Your name, your company, filed before your employment start date. We've been tracking this for 2 years, waiting to see if you were aware. Smart, patient, the kind of operation that actually read the fine print. I typed one line. If we're going to talk, we do it face to face. He replied in 15 minutes. Meeting set for Monday. Their office in Ottawa. He'd arrange the flight, cover everything, keep it quiet. I said yes. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in years. Pulled out all the original files from the fireproof box in my closet, the CIPO filing from when I was sitting in my father's study, the provincial registration for Winslow Engineering Solutions, the licensing agreement I'd signed with Genford back in 2013 when they were too excited about their Series A to examine the fine print. I went through every page, every clause, every date. It was all still there, clean, legal, ironclad. Genford thought they owned Argus because I'd built most of it while employed. Standard assumption in Canadian tech. But employment doesn't override prior art. Version 0 to assumption in Canadian tech. But employment doesn't override prior art. Version 0.8 was mine before they hired me full-time. Everything after that was licensed to them, not transferred, not assigned, licensed, under specific terms that required my ongoing approval. And Tyler's Sentinel rebrand at Collision Conference, public announcement, national media, press release sent to every tech journalist from Toronto to Vancouver. That triggered Clause 6.1. Breach of contract. Every licensing arrangement tied to Argus could be challenged now. They'd fired the architect and breached the contract in the same month. Monday morning, I flew to Ottawa. Ridgeline's office was in Kanata in the tech corridor, cleaner than Genford's flashy Bay Street tower, less glass and less showing off. The kind of building designed for people who actually built defense systems, not people who gave TED-style talks about disrupting them. Ian Crawford met me in the lobby. 59. Looked like someone who'd spent 30 years actually building monitoring systems instead of managing people who built them. Firm handshake, direct eye contact. The kind of man my father would have respected. "Joe," he said, "appreciate you coming up. You said you did your homework," I replied. "Show me." He took me to a conference room. No theatre, Just a table, chairs, and a view of some November trees losing their last leaves. He opened a binder. Inside was a complete breakdown. My CIPO filing, the original Argus version 0.8 architecture documents, a timeline showing the filing date was 6 weeks before my Genford employment contract, clauses 9.4 and 6.1 highlighted in yellow. "You're the owner," he said simply. "Not them. We'd like to work with you, not try to work around you." He slid another document across the table. Exclusive licensing and partnership agreement, $680 million over 12 years, structured with milestone payments tied to federal contract wins. Role: Chief Systems Architect with full approval rights on any derivative works, modifications, or sublicensing. Office, team, resources, and a seat at the table for every technical decision involving Argus. "We don't hire last names," Ian said. "We hire architects." I read through it. Every clause, every term. My father taught me that. Read everything twice. Trust nothing you haven't verified yourself. It was clean. Fair. More than fair. The kind of deal you offer when you actually respect the work and the person who built it. I looked up at Ian. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't selling. Just waiting. "What happens to Genford?" I asked. "That's up to them," he said. "If they try to expand Argus deployment or license it to any new clients under the Sentinel branding, they'll hit your clauses. Their lawyers will figure it out eventually, but that's not your concern anymore." He was right. It wasn't. I stared at that contract for a long time. 26 years at Genford, I'd trained half their engineers, built the infrastructure from a prototype in my basement to a platform monitoring critical systems across the country, stayed through 3 rounds of layoffs, turned down a CTO offer from a Vancouver firm and another from a company in the States, because I believed in loyalty, because I thought 26 years of showing up and building something real would matter. And they fired me over Teams with the camera off at 7,053 on a Monday. "Take your time," Ian said. "But that company died the day Tyler renamed my work without asking. The only question was whether I'd let him bury it too. I signed it, right there, one signature. Clean and final. We're announcing this Friday," Ian said. Press release. "You're listed as the creator and chief architect of Argus. Your name, not theirs. If that's going to be a problem, tell me now." "No problem," I said. We shook hands. No celebration, just business done right. I flew back to Toronto that afternoon. Didn't tell anyone. Didn't post anything. Just waited. Wednesday morning I was making breakfast, eggs and toast, the radio on CBC talking about something I wasn't listening to, when Miles texted me, "Joel, Genford's website just changed. The Sentinel banner is gone." Just disappeared overnight. Legal sent an internal memo about a full audit of all Argus licensing agreements. What is happening? I smiled. Took a sip of coffee. "Maybe they're finally reading the contracts," I typed back. Thursday. Another text from Miles. Screenshot attached. Internal email from Genford's general counsel to the entire executive team. Subject line in red. "Uragen. Core IP ownership review. Immediate action required." Friday morning, Ridgeline's press release went live. Ridgeline Defense Technologies announces exclusive partnership with Joel Winslow, creator of the Argus Core architecture. It hit beta kit by 9 a.m. The Globe and Mail business section by 10. Every industry newsletter by noon. LinkedIn was on fire by 2 p.m. My phone started buzzing. Former colleagues, people I hadn't heard from in years, all asking the same question. Did Genford really not own Argus? I didn't answer most of them, but the walls were cracking, and they were just beginning to understand how deep the cracks went. The audio file came through Saturday morning. Miles sent it with no message, just an attachment. Fill name, exec, emergency, ungaspia, emergency, call.m4. A was still in bed when my phone buzzed. Sat up, grabbed my coffee from the nightstand, the mug my daughter gave me that says "World's Most Adequate Dad," and hit play. Static first. Someone fumbling with a speakerphone. Chairs. Then Tyler's voice, higher pitched than usual. Panicked. Wait, he used a different entity. Winslow Engineering Solutions. When was this registered? Frank Beaumont, his father, the CEO. His voice was tight, controlled. 12 years ago. The CIPO filing predates his full-time employment contract by 6 weeks. Silence. Long enough that I thought the recording had cut out. So we don't own Argus? A third voice. Female. Board member. Not the core system, Frank said. We have usage rights through a derivative licensing agreement he granted us in 2013, but those rights are conditional on compliance with the original terms. Which terms? Tyler asked. His voice was shaking now. All of them, including Clause 6.1. No system renaming or rebranding without the original architect's written consent. Someone typing. Fast. Frantic. The SENTL rebrand. Tyler's voice dropped to almost a whisper. At Collision Conference, that violated it. Yes. Who cleared legal on that rebrand? Who reviewed the original licensing agreement? The board member's voice was climbing now. Sharp. Angry. Nobody answered. This is fixable, right? Tyler again, desperate now. We reach out to him, we negotiate, we offer equity, we offer wetter one, we negotiate, we offer wetter he wants, He already negotiated, Frank said flatly, with Ridgeline, $680 million exclusive licensing deal. It went public yesterday. The silence after that lasted what felt like an eternity. He went to our competitor. Tyler's voice was barely audible. Because we fired him. Because you fired him, someone corrected. Cold, precise, without consulting legal, without verifying IP ownership, without performing any due diligence whatsoever on the single most important piece of intellectual property this company holds. I had HR on the call, Tyler said weakly. HR is not legal counsel, the voice shot back. And where was general counsel? He was supposed to be on that termination call. His camera stayed off, someone muttered. He knew. The recording ended there. I sat holding my phone. Coffee had gone lukewarm. I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't even satisfied exactly. It was more like watching a building come down in slow motion when you're the only one who noticed the crack in the foundation a decade ago. They'd fired Joel Winslow, the employee. They never owned Joel Winslow, the architect. Monday morning, the lawsuit started. First one hit at 9 a.m. Eastern. Class action from a consortium of Series B investors. Complaint alleged material misrepresentation of core intellectual property ownership in investment disclosures and offering memoranda. Second lawsuit came at 11 a.m. Their Series C lead investor, a pension fund out of Calgary. Same allegations, significantly bigger numbers. Third one landed at 2 p.m. A federal contract through Public Services and Procurement Canada, $41 million Argus deployment for a D&D monitoring project. They wanted out. Contract termination based on Genford's inability to guarantee IP ownership for classified infrastructure systems. The stock started dropping at market open on the TSX, down 17% in the first 3 hours. By close, down 26% for the day. Tuesday was worse, down another 14% at open. By end of day, total decline was 43% from Friday's close. Market cap that had been hovering around $750 million was sitting below $430 million in 4 trading days. My phone buzzed, text from someone I knew. Russ Alderman, managing partner at a Bay Street fund. We met at a conference years ago. Decent guy. Just pulled our commitment. $38 million. Should I read the contracts, Joel? Sorry it went this way. Not your fault. I texted back. Due diligence is everyone's job. He sent a thumbs up. Another text from Miles. They just pulled Tyler from all client-facing meetings. Board meeting happening right now. Frank hasn't left his office in 2 days. I didn't respond to that one. Just watched. By Wednesday afternoon, it was everywhere. Globe and Mail, BNN Bloomberg, Financial Post. Genford Systems built on borrowed foundation was the headline everyone landed on. Some version of the same idea. The company's flagship product wasn't actually theirs. Tyler posted on LinkedIn Wednesday night. Someone forwarded it to me. Grateful for the opportunity to transition into an advisory capacity. Excited to support Genford's next chapter from a strategic perspective. Advisory capacity. That's corporate language for we can't publicly fire the CEO's son, but he's never making another decision here. The comments were brutal. Over 150 before he turned them off. Advising on what? The lawsuits you created. How do you rebrand a product you don't own? This is what happens when nepotism meets incompetence at the C-suite level. I didn't comment. Didn't like it. Didn't share it. Just read it once and close the tab. Thursday morning the announcement came, Frank Beaumont to step down as CEO of Genford Systems, effective immediately. The press release said he wanted to pursue new ventures and spend time with family. Standard exit language used by every executive who's been pushed out the door. But Miles sent me the leaked board minutes an hour later. The real language was different. Board vote of non-confidence. 7-2. Resignation demanded due to catastrophic loss of institutional investor confidence, failure to maintain adequate intellectual property oversight, and breach of fiduciary duty to shareholders. They'd forced him out. The man who founded Genford 29 years ago in a rented office above a shawarma shop on Bloor Street. Gone in 4 days because he let his son play executive and nobody read the contracts. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number with a 416 area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Mr. Winslow, a woman's voice. Professional, measured. This is Andrea Kimura, Interim General Counsel at Genford Systems. Do you have a moment? I'm listening, I said. We'd like to explore a potential resolution regarding the Argus licensing situation. Would you be open to a confidential discussion? I looked out my window. Same stretch of lakeshore, same sliver of lake between the towers. But everything felt different now. Put it in writing, I said. My lawyer will review it. Of course. May I just... I hung up. 2 hours later the email came. Subject, settlement proposal. Without prejudice and confidential. I opened it. Scanned the first paragraph. They wanted to negotiate continued use of Argus under a new licensing agreement, offering equity, retroactive compensation, public recognition, everything they should have offered 26 years ago. I closed the email without reading the rest. Then I archived it. Saturday morning, I flew back to Ottawa. Not for a meeting, for my first official day as Chief Systems Architect at Ridgeline Defense Technologies. The office felt different when you actually worked there. People nodded when I walked past. Respectful. Genuine. Not the performative friendliness of a Bay Street tower, but the quiet acknowledgement of people who understood what it meant to build things that mattered. Ian Crawford met me at the elevator. Ready to build something that actually lasts, he asked. Let's see the lab, I said. And we got to work. The engineering lab at Ridgeline was on the second floor. Ian walked me through it that first morning. Rows of workstations, servers humming in climate-controlled racks, whiteboards covered in system diagrams and architecture maps. It looked the way Genford did 20 years ago, before the executives started caring more about branding than building. Your team, Ian said, gesturing to a group of 5 engineers clustered around a monitor. They've been studying the Argus documentation for a month, getting familiar with the architecture. But they're waiting on you for the next phase. One of them stood up. Young woman, maybe 29, sharp eyes, nervous energy. Reminded me of Miles when I first started training him. Mr. Winslow, she said, I've read your original CIPO filing probably 25 times. The threat detection framework in version 0.8, the way you structured the modular layers so each one could be swapped independently without compromising the whole system. I've never seen anything that elegant for critical infrastructure. How did you know it would need to scale to federal defense applications? I looked at her, hungry to learn. Respectful of the work, not the title. I didn't know it would scale, I told her. I built it to solve one problem correctly. Clean architecture, minimal dependencies, modular by design. Scaling came later because the foundation was solid. That's the only way to build anything that lasts. She nodded slowly. Processing that. Question, another engineer said. Male, mid-30s, senior systems lead. What happens when Genford tries to deploy Argus updates under the Sentinel branding? Do we pursue legal action? We don't have to, I said. Every contract they sign using that branding is invalid under Clause 6.1. Their clients will discover it when integration fails compliance reviews. Federal systems in Canada require verified IP ownership for security clearances through PSPC and D&D procurement. When those checks fail, their clients will initiate proceedings. We don't need to do anything except keep building. Ian smiled at that. All right, let's get started. The next 2 months moved fast. Ridgeline announced Argus integration partnerships with 3 federal agencies that Genford had been competing for. Department of National Defense Infrastructure Monitoring, Critical Systems for 2 provincial energy utilities, a threat detection network for Transport Canada. We won all 3 contracts, not because we played games, because we had the actual architect and clean IP ownership. Federal procurement in Canada requires that. Genford simply couldn't compete anymore. Miles texted me updates every few days. I didn't ask for them, but he sent them anyway. New CEO started today. Some consultant from McKinsey's Toronto office. Nobody knows her. They're settling 2 of the investor lawsuits. Undisclosed amounts, but I heard it's significant. Layoffs, 35% of engineering. They kept me, but my team went from 12 to 4. Tyler's not in the office anymore. Someone said he's doing a startup accelerator program, telling people about lessons in resilient leadership. I'm not joking. I read them, but rarely responded. That wasn't my world anymore. In January, I got an email from Irene Hayashi. She was 64 now, my father's old law partner at their firm in Kingston. She'd helped me set up Winslow Engineering Solutions 12 years ago when I was sitting in his study, still numb, trying to figure out what to do with his advice and a stack of forms I barely understood. "Your father would be so proud," she wrote. "He always said the best protection is the one they don't know exists until it matters. You learned that well. Tea sometime," I replied. "Tea sometime," I replied. "Tea sounds perfect. And Irene, thank you for everything you did back then." She'd never billed me for setting up that company. Said it was the last favor she could do for my father. A few hours of paperwork that turned out to be worth $680 million. Spring came. I got invited to speak at a National Infrastructure and Defense Technology Conference in Ottawa. Big event, 2,000 attendees from across the defense and utility sectors. Panel discussion on IP protection and systems architecture in Canadian critical infrastructure. I almost said no. Public speaking wasn't something I'd ever sought out. But Ian convinced me. "They need to hear from someone who builds," he said. "Not about the legal drama, about how to do it right. That's what actually matters." So I went. The panel was on the main stage. 4 seats, 4 nameplates. When I sat down, I looked at mine. Joel Winslow, creator, Argus core system, not former Genford employee, not consultant. Creator. The moderator asked solid questions. How do you balance security with scalability in Canadian critical infrastructure? What's the future of AI integrated threat detection? How do you protect innovation when the contracts get complicated? I answered honestly. Talked about modular design. About building for 15 years out instead of the next quarterly report. About reading your contracts and understanding what you're signing before someone else decides what your work is worth. After the panel, there was a line. 30 or 40 people waiting to ask questions, hand me business cards, pitch their startups. I talked to most of them. Gave advice where I could. Near the end, a young guy stepped up. Maybe 27. Engineer badge from some startup in Kitchener-Waterloo I didn't recognize. "Mr. Winslow," he said, "I followed the whole Genford situation. The whole thing. Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How did you know to protect yourself 12 years ago? What made you think you needed to set up a separate company and keep the IP independent?" I thought about my father's voicemail. About sitting in his study in Kingston after he died, surrounded by 43 years of patent law files and those books with the cracked spines and the 3 colors of highlighter. About the lesson he learned the hard way at Morrison & Fields and passed down to me over a phone call I almost didn't answer. "I didn't protect myself," I told him. "I protected my work." There's a difference. Your employer can fire you. Your entitle can disappear. Your office can get cleaned out while you're in the parking garage trying to process what just happened. But your name on the right document, filed on the right date, with the right clauses, that's yours. Nobody can take that unless you let them. He typed that into his phone. Word for word. So, you always knew you might get fired? No, I said. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought 26 years of showing up every day and building something real would count for something. But my father taught me to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Turns out he was right. The kid nodded. Thank you. Seriously, he walked away. I watched him go, hoping he'd remember that conversation when it mattered for him. Walking out of the convention center that evening, my phone buzzed. Email notification. Subject: Final settlement offer. Without prejudice. Confidential. From Genford's legal team. Fourth one they'd sent since November. I didn't open it, just archived it and kept walking into the cold Ottawa evening. 8 months later, Ridgeline announced a $920 million federal contract, largest critical infrastructure security deployment in Department of National Defense history. Argus at the core. My architecture, my protocols, my name on every technical specification and compliance document. The press release listed me as Chief Systems Architect and Creator. Miles texted me that afternoon. Saw the D&D announcement. That's unreal, Joel. Congrats. Thanks, I replied. How are things over there? Honestly? Quiet. Genford's basically a maintenance shop now. Small contracts. Nothing new. I'm looking around. Send me your resume, I typed. He sent it 12 minutes later. I forwarded it to Ian with one line. Best systems engineer I ever trained. Loyal, smart, and he knows when to record the important meetings. Ian replied, bring him in Monday. That evening, I sat on my couch with a beer and my father's voicemail pulled up on my phone. I hadn't listened to it in months. My daughter was coming for dinner in an hour, wanted to make pasta and tell me about her new job in Vancouver. The lake was just barely visible between the towers, catching the last light. I hit play. Corporate loyalty in this country runs one direction until it doesn't. Trust your old man on this one. I did trust him, and he was right. They fired the employee. They never owned the architect, and now everyone knew it.